It's really no secret that Disney hasn't been doing too well with Star Wars since they bought it back in 2012, which honestly isn't too surprising, seeing as they pushed the original creator away, tried to wing some of the most anticipated movies of all time, and just generally don't seem to understand what Star Wars is really all about. But I've already dedicated countless videos to explaining all the different ways Disney has gone wrong with Star Wars, and I'll leave a link to my Star Wars playlist in the description in case you'd like to check any of them out. But today I would like to do something different and give Disney credit where it's due, specifically with their 2024 effort, Skeleton Crew. Because when you really look at it, that show, more than any other, is what George Lucas intended Star Wars to be. And there will be spoilers for Skeleton Crew ahead, so in case you haven't seen it yet and would like to, don't proceed with this video. I won't be giving out any other spoiler warnings here. Okay, so to start off simply, and before most of you say it, one of the biggest reasons that Skeleton Crew is a lot closer to how George Lucas envisioned Star Wars is because it's actually competently written. Unlike other Star Wars shows and movies released under Disney, everything the characters do in the show actually makes sense, doesn't break anything in the canon or create plot holes, and there's actually setup and payoffs as opposed to something happening based off the flimsiest pretext. And though all of this definitely works in its favor, don't get me wrong, as a writer myself, I'd be the first person to say that good writing should be the end goal of any story. That's not exactly what I want to discuss here. Because let's face it, when Star Wars is bad, you know about it. Instead, what I want to give this particular show credit for is its tone, because I've said it in plenty of other videos and I'll say it again here, but George Lucas always intended Star Wars to be for children first and foremost. It was even noted on many occasions, both before and after he sold Star Wars, that the most important thing to him about it was that it appealed to children. And I know Lucas doesn't own Star Wars anymore, but he's still the man who created it, and a major reason that it's still one of the most well-known franchises on Earth. So like it or not, his opinion on it does still matter. Sure, he was willing to go to darker and more adult places with Star Wars himself, but he usually did that more out of necessity rather than because he actively decided to make any particular thing geared more towards adults. And he also wanted to make sure that it was always different, and that does include occasionally going in a darker direction. But the point is that, among countless other things that Disney went against his wishes on, most of the content they made regarding Star Wars was decidedly not made with children in mind. Sure, maybe most of it was inoffensive enough so that kids could watch it and not be left too traumatized by what they saw, but it definitely wasn't being made for them. But it's a completely different story with Skeleton Crew, because here, we get the story of a group of children on a hidden planet who accidentally launch themselves out into the wider galaxy, and then have to rely on the help of an untrustworthy pirate to get them back home. In essence, Skeleton Crew has all the hallmarks of a classic children's adventure story that harkens back to ancient tales, and considering Star Wars itself was based on quite a few ancient story molds, that's exactly the kind of story Lucas would have wanted told with the property. On top of the fact that such a premise had never been done in Star Wars before, which was another thing that was very important to Lucas, that everything always feel new and different. And a mystery pirate adventure is most definitely something that hadn't been explored in Star Wars before. Though once again, what majorly helps it along in these departments is that its story is actually very well written, allowing it to be enjoyed by those who are watching it for what it is, instead of being torn apart for all of its plot holes and bad decisions. But even apart from the fact that this is a show that actually appeals to children and is something new and different, there are other aspects to it got right as far as George Lucas goes as well. For example, Lucas felt Star Wars should always be pushing the boundaries of what was possible with technology and special effects, and that was yet another thing that many, though not all, Star Wars shows suffered in terms of. Most of the time it felt like Marvel got first pickings when it came to the best special effects, and Star Wars got what was left over. And considering how ridiculed Marvel was for many of their effects, but either way, in Skeleton Crew, though not having the greatest or most innovative technology of its time, still looks a lot more like an effort was actually made to have the effects feel real. And special mention must go to all the practical effects, because they not only look really convincing, but help reinforce both that lived-in feeling George Lucas was going for with Star Wars, and also helped push some of the boundaries in that regard. Because one has to admit, a lot of the practical stuff looks very real and alive. Again, nobody can claim this show is the most innovative thing to ever be released, but at least it feels like an effort was made here, and that they even pulled off some pretty impressive stuff on the more practical side of things. And not to mention, there's also the fact that Jod actually stays the villain to the end of the show instead of pulling a half-hearted redemption like Disney has been infamous for doing in the late 2010s and early 2020s. Now, I've already spent countless hours explaining my issues with how Disney's been handling their villains. So all I'll say is that it's nice to see them actually do the right thing for once. It's just a shame it couldn't have been in one of their animated movies. But the point is, when George Lucas was in charge of Star Wars, most villains didn't actually reform. That's what made Darth Vader's redemption so powerful and notable, because generally, when somebody becomes a villain, they stay that way until the bitter end. Sure, there are a few exceptions to that, but on the whole, as far as George Lucas was concerned, if a character became a villain, they stayed the villain. So the fact that Jod doesn't reform and commits to being the bad guy for the final 2 episodes is another thing this show does right. Though even beyond feeling more Star Wars-like, that was still a very smart move on the writer's part for reasons that should be pretty obvious. So the point here is, the people behind Skeleton Crew most definitely did their homework when it came to understanding what a Star Wars show should look like. Because simply put, it might be one of the only things released under Disney that feels like something George Lucas would have made himself. It appeals to a younger generation of kids and tells a story that'll appeal to children, has new and different ideas, at least tries to have good special effects, and understands how Lucas wrote characters and that quality writing is key no matter what. Sure, not everything may feel exactly like George Lucas or that he would have agreed with every single decision they made, but those are impossible expectations to meet. Frankly, this is as close as one could realistically get. For all intents and purposes, this is the kind of show George Lucas would have wanted out of Star Wars, and the fact that it does pretty much everything he would have done only reinforces that. In the end, Skeleton Crew actually respects George Lucas and the things he had in mind for Star Wars, like few other things to come out of Disney have. And if Star Wars is to have a future, then it needs to take quite a few lessons away from this show and adjust itself to be closer to what he had in mind for it. Okay, that's everything I wanted to cover. So now give me your opinions. Do you believe that Skeleton Crew may just be one of the best representations of what George Lucas meant Star Wars to be to come out of Disney since they bought Lucasfilm? Or do you think it's just an average show and that I'm giving it way too much credit? Please feel free to let me know in the comments below. And let me just note that you do not have to agree with me or anything I said in this video just because you watched it. Star Wars means something different to everybody, and this is no exception. So if you think I was completely wrong about Skeleton Crew, that is totally fine. And thank you all for watching. It is very much appreciated, and I hope to see you all next time.